the big question is this: how do pastors like us who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. I hope you are doing wonderful. I am doing great, and let me tell you why. So last week, I got word that my book, Millennial Leadership, was chosen to be one of the top 10 finalists in the 2020 Author Elite Awards. So many of you are probably wondering what that is. So I published my book last November, my book Millennial Leadership, and it's a leadership book. It's focused on foresight and future and, kind of the adjustments of leadership. And I went through an organization called Author Academy Elite. And they publish several books every year, but then they hold an award ceremony every year that anyone can be considered for. And so I was nominated. My book was nominated back in April. And so there's been voting and, some different points of criteria throughout the summer. And last week I received word that my book was chosen to be a top 10 finalist in the business and investing category. And so I'm super excited because it was really a surprise to me. There are some great authors in the business and investing category. And so I'm really excited about just the opportunity to be considered, the opportunity that possibly I might win, and my book might be an Author Elite Award winner. And so that's very exciting for me. So let me just kind of give you a little background on what that's all about. So the Author Academy, or the Author Elite Awards, are hosted by Kerry Oberbrunner and his organization, Igniting Souls, which is really just a community of authors and business leaders, pastors and influencers who are really focused on changing the world for the better, for making a difference, for impacting other people's lives, and for just doing things a little bit differently than maybe the rest of the world is doing it. And so it's been a pleasure to be a part of the Igniting Souls community for the last 2 or 3 years. And then also to be one of their Author Academy Award or Author Academy authors. And it's been a great experience for me, a lot more than I could have possibly imagined. And once again, it kind of exceeds my expectations now that I am the book is being considered as a finalist. And so there are 10 books. Again, like I mentioned, there are some great authors in the mix. One of them is Jim Edwards, who is a world-renowned copywriter, and his book, Copywriting Secrets, has been just selling like hotcakes for the last few months and has done really, really well. And so I'm going up against him and several others. And so my mantra has now become beat Jim. That's my goal, to beat Jim Edwards. And so he's got a great book. I purchased it myself, read it. It's really good, especially if you are starting a new business or an entrepreneur or anything like that. His book is great for copywriting and ads and just learning how to do that better. And so that's kind of what that looks like for me. So just the overview of the book for those of you who have not yet purchased it. So the book is, it's the project that I did for my doctoral program. So I graduated 2 years ago with a doctorate in strategic leadership foresight from Regent University. And the final project that I chose to do was to write a book. And so what I did was I chose the topic of millennials. And many of you listening to this podcast are millennials. You fall in that window of birth year. So depending on the research, it's 1980 to 2000. If you were born in between that 20-year window, there's a little bit of different research. Some will go as low as like 76, 77. Others will go as high as 2004. So, but generally in that 1980 to 2000 window, if you were born in those years, you are considered a millennial. I am kind of in that cutoff window. So I was born in 77. So depending on the research, sometimes I'm a millennial and sometimes I'm a Gen Xer. Recently, however, there's come out new research where they have chosen to create a micro generation called exennial, I think is how you pronounce it. But it's this window of 1975, 76 to 1981 or two. And the reason they did that is because we are the little small micro generation that grew up in our childhood in an analog world. And then when we hit our middle school teenage years is when the computer revolution started happening. We started moving into a digital world. So so if you're in that little window, if you're around my age, you remember growing up without anything digital, really. And maybe you had an Atari or a Nintendo, but there were no computers. There were no cell phones. There was nothing like that. But when you got to be maybe a middle schooler or high schooler, then all that started popping up. And there were, I think the first handheld was maybe a Game Boy or something like that, the Nintendo Game Boy. But we kind of fit in that micro generation. So what the book really focuses on is it focuses on the world that is being created by this millennial generation, the 1980 to 2000 window. We are going through a major shift, and all of us know that. If you've paid any attention to the news or any social research or studies, you know that millennials are fully adults now. I think the youngest ones are 22 or 23. Fully adults, and they're fully in the workforce. And the older millennials are now beginning to move into leadership positions. If they're not entrepreneurs, they're starting to move into CEO positions, manager positions. And so millennials are fully engaged in the largest percentage of the workforce in the world. And so what's happening now is the world is going through a major shift because millennials are making more decisions, and the shift is moving towards the world they're creating. So what I chose to focus on in the book is to look at what that world's going to look like. Not now necessarily, and not even in the next couple years, but 5, 10, 15 years down the road. How is that world going to look? My degree is in foresight, and one of the things that we do is we look anywhere between 10 and 50 years down the road and project out based on current trends and what's happening in the world. We project out and kind of give a scenario of what it's going to look like. And so for me, when I look at the world that the millennials are building, it's a world that's a lot more compassionate. It's a world that, especially from a leadership standpoint, we're moving away from the top-down leadership models. We're moving away from dictatorship models that actually are effective. And we're moving into leadership models that are more compassionate, more empathetic, more focused on collaboration and teams. And so the ivory tower leader is really something of the past, and you still see some leaders doing that and kind of operating on that kind of leadership model. But the reality is that they are losing followers and they are losing influence because our world doesn't work like that anymore, especially the millennial generation. The millennial generation, and most of you who are millennials, I would assume, can attest to this. If somebody comes in with a strong hand and dictating your decisions, you have this built-in trigger that says, no, that's not how that works, and that's not how it's going to work for me. And in the book, I talk a lot about why that is. What led millennials to become like that? What events took place when they were growing up that gave them this mindset or this perspective? And if you're a boomer or a Gen Xer, millennials may rub you the wrong way because of some of the tendencies they have. But in Millennial Leadership, I talk about the events that honestly we created as boomers and Xers, the events that we created or the events that happened in our young adult years that then created the world that they grew up in and kind of set the tone for why they are the way they are. And so I even make the point in the book that if you don't like the way millennials are, then you should really scold yourself, because most of us who are boomers and Xers, we raised millennials. And so we raised them the way we felt like they needed to be raised. We nurtured them and loved them and did everything we could to set them up well. And then when millennials became adults and they started doing exactly what we had set them up to do, a lot of us said, well, I don't like that. I don't like how that works. And so really what my main focus in the book is to advocate for common ground, because the generational argument is pointless. It's an argument that's never going to resolve itself. And the only way that we can really come around and do great things together and make a difference together is if we find that common ground where our differences are either minimized or managed, and we focus on how do we do great things side by side with one another. As millennials, how do millennials learn from the boomers and Xers and not have to learn the hard way, the way some of us had to? And how do boomers and Xers learn from millennials things that just come naturally to them? Because they grew up completely in a digital world, there are things that are second nature for millennials that boomers and Xers, we really struggle with. And not even from a digital perspective, but even from a relational perspective. Millennials have grown up on teams from, the time they were very little. They were in some way, they were on a team dynamic, whether it was an organized team, whether it was just teams in school or whatever. They're a lot more adept to collaboration and working together, and even, looking at flat level leadership where the leader is really maybe has more responsibility, authority, but is more also a part of the team. And so in the book, I kind of explain how all of that, the adjustment that we're going through, and then how that's all going to play out in the years to come, and what adjustments we all need to make now in order to be effective in 5, 10, 15 years. And so, and most of us are young enough to where we'll be in the workforce for another 15, 20, 30 years. If we don't make the adjustments now, it's going to be very difficult for us to remain effective and influential down the road. And so, so millennial leadership, it gives you the tools that you need in order to make sure that you are ready for when all of that shift is fully in effect. And so that's what the book is about. That's the overall perspective. And so again, it's been chosen to be a top 10 finalist in the Author Elite Awards. I'm excited, and this is where you come in. So remember, the mantra is beat Jim Edwards. And so beat copywriting secrets. That's the mantra. And so what I'm going to include a link somewhere on the podcast, whether you're watching it or listening to it, somewhere I'm going to provide a link for you. What I want you to do is I want you to click on that link, and I want you to go to the site that the link takes you to, and there will be an opportunity for you to vote for the book that you want to win in each category. And so the business and investing category is on page 2. So when you go to when you click the link, it'll take you to the page. Go to where all the books are listed and click the next button or the over button. It'll take you to page 2. And somewhere in that list of 10 books, you'll find Millennial Leadership. And I just want you to vote for it, please, because the goal is to beat Jim. And so, so if you'll go in there, I need everybody who is willing to do that to go on there and vote, because it's going to take a lot of votes to beat Jim Edwards. And so, again, I'm super excited. If you have not yet purchased the book, you can buy it on Amazon. That's definitely an option. But if you want to, you can purchase it through me at brandonpartycooper.com/millennial leadership. You'll get you'll receive a autograph copy. I'll send you an autograph copy. And if you will pay for the shipping and handling, then I will pay for the book itself. So you'll get the book for free. You pay shipping and handling, and you'll get it autographed, and I'll send it out to you once you order it. So again, that's brandonpartycooper.com/millennial leadership. Go there, purchase the book, and I would love to get feedback if you've already read the book and have some thoughts or feedback. I would love to hear it. So whether you comment here on the podcast or whether you send me an email or find me on Facebook, somehow let me know what you thought. Even criticism, I'm okay with that. One of the parts of being in the foresight world and being a futurist is to understand that you don't get it all. You don't get it right all the time. And part of how we readjust and refocus our forecast is by feedback from other people. And so, especially for you millennials, if you're saying, I don't agree with this, or there's something here that doesn't jive with me, I would love to hear what that is. So send me your thoughts, send me your testimonies of the book, if it's helpful, if it's effective for you. I just would love to hear back and see how the book is making an impact, and maybe where I missed it in the book. So give me the feedback. I'd love to. Again, go vote for Millennial Leadership in the business and investing category. Purchase your book, brandonpartycooper.com/millennial leadership. And that's it for this episode. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. Hope you're having a great week, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.